come along with me and hear the short version of my testimony, which is the first video that I want to share with you in this space. I plan to share a lot more and a lot more detail in other videos, but I just want to get this short video out to you right now. So, I'll start by just saying that I have lived a very unusual, unique, and unconventional life. And it doesn't fit neatly into any one box. And that is something I think that my whole life I have really tried to live a life that couldn't be pinned down or, given a label. I never wanted to be that kind of a person or live that kind of a life. And so I didn't. I didn't. And I'm a very creative person. And so I've always had a very unique and unconventional life. And I'm going to tell you how I came to be a follower of Jesus, of Yeshua. And it is very unusual, and I never expected to be walking on this path, quite honestly. I was pretty steadfast in the path that I was on, and so this really came as a surprise for me. And so let me just tell you like a little bit about my background just so you have an idea. So I was a military brat. I had moved 33 times by the time I was 15 years old, and I didn't have a lot of consistency in my life. I lived on base with my parents. Our family lived on base. There were even places where my dad was stationed that he got exceptions for, that they didn't have family housing for, that we got to go along. And so we were with him everywhere he was stationed. And so I moved a lot. We didn't have any kind of consistent church or spiritual upbringing. My parents both identified as Christians, but we weren't raised in a Christian household. Like, we weren't raised to be Christians. We weren't raised to follow Jesus, or to pay attention to his teachings or any of that. We did go to church on occasion, usually for the holidays, and it was more about looking the part than actually being the part. So there's a lot more that I'll eventually share about my upbringing, but for now, that's enough. Since very early childhood, have always felt very connected to God, and I've had a long history of supernatural experiences, and or what non-Christians would call psychic experiences, or multiversal or multidimensional experiences. I've been able to. I have frequently seen discarnate entities, seen in the spirit, heard them, and had a lot of precognitive dreams, and also what non-believers call clairsentience, like this knowing. What I think the popular nomenclature is a download. I would just get downloads of information. And this is something I've experienced my whole life. It's been an ongoing thing for me. Some parts of it have been more predominant than others as time has gone by. Getting the downloads has been more predominant than anything else until recently. But that's been my experience. The way that I related to God was not really within the parameters of any kind of religious or dogmatic or doctrinal upbringing. I didn't really have a strong foundation in that or education in that. So I never really connected very strongly to the God of the Bible. I never really connected very strongly to that way of thinking about God. I had a very personal experience of God, and so it was just a unique upbringing. As time went on, I explored a lot of different world religions and spiritual paths and spiritual practices and plant medicine and you name it. I was exploring it. I did a lot of meditation, and I've just have explored a lot and looked into a lot and read so many books, an unbelievable amount of books, and talked to many, many, many people. And I think part of that too is just being so open-minded, being a military brat, being a third culture kid, like growing up in all these different places and talking to all these different people who had different ideas about the world and different cultures and traditions and types of food and all these different things. It really opens your mind to like things can be different. Things don't have to be just exactly the way that you see them or think that they are. That many things can be happening and can be experienced as being true at the same time. And so that's really the background of like the very brief background. I will definitely go into a lot more of that. I'll share a lot more of that. There's a lot about me that that makes my testimony interesting. Some people might even think it's salacious in a way, but for right now, what's really important is just for you to know that I just had a very unconventional upbringing. I had a very deep spiritual connection to the Creator, but it was not doctrinal at all. There was no real religion involved in how I connected on a personal level with our Creator. So, I've had a morning practice, like a morning spiritual practice, for 30 years or so. And it's varied. What I do in that morning practice has varied over the years. Keeping it really fresh and alive for me and interesting, and just pursuing these different interests that I've always had. So at this particular time, we're talking about early spring of 2022. So this is after COVID and after the George Floyd riots. I live in Minneapolis, and so that was deeply affecting for me and everyone I know. It's difficult to describe what it was like to live here, and especially difficult not to allow that to descend into some kind of like political conversation or political ideology, because the realness, the visceral realness of living here during that time is what matters more than people's opinions about what should or should not have been done in the situation, or who was right or wrong about people protesting or people rioting or whatever was going on. The way that it impacted those of us that lived here and have real lives and are real human beings was profound, and it still has an impact to this day. So, we had just come off of the tail end of all of that, plus with everything with the pandemic, like still like, oh, now we've got another, variant that, you got to be careful of, and all this stuff. And again, I don't really want to have a conversation about that, especially not right now. Maybe in the future I will say more about my thoughts about that. But for right now, it's just important to know that that's kind of what the time that we were sort of exiting out of, like this period of time that felt like maybe we were going to come into a little bit more of the whatever normal is. And yeah, early spring 2022. And so I have a normal morning practice. And at this point in time, my practice consisted of me waking up before I would get out of bed and starting to just list all the things that I was grateful for. I usually would start like, I would hear the birds singing and I would give thanks for the birds singing, and I would see the sunshine. I would give thanks for the sun shining. And then I would just sort of snowball after that of all the things that I was feeling grateful for. And so that was the very first thing that I would do. And then I would say a couple of prayers. There's a prayer that Spirit has been guiding me and teaching me over many, many years now, a couple of decades, and refining in me that's very deeply personal, that I would pray. And then I would just say like a general prayer for well-being for everyone in my family, all of my loved ones, and myself for the day. Then I would make some coffee and I would sit down and read a few books, usually something based in recovery or something around healing trauma, usually something contemplative, or something having to do with some form of mindfulness, or a teacher that I really enjoyed listening to and reading. And then I would make a little list of my intentions for the day based on the reading for the day. Based on whatever I read that day, I would make a little list of intentions or affirmations, and I would just repeat them. And then I would take my dog for a walk. And that was how I started my day. And one day this spring, when I first woke up, before I had an opportunity to begin listing the things I was grateful for, in my mind were the words, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Now, keep in mind, I hadn't even looked at or seen a Bible for more than 20 years, probably 25 years or so. And I didn't have an upbringing with the Bible, not anything serious. I had read bits and pieces of the Bible, but nothing serious. So, but that's people hear that one. It's in some popular music, so it's not that uncommon to hear that phrase. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll pay attention today, and see if anything happens today, like, okay, I hear that. So it's also important to know that the way that I related to God at this point in time was, I had come to the conclusion that God was the source of all creation and was love. And so I referred to God as divine loving source. So that's the words that I use. That's how I felt comfortable thinking about the Creator, as divine loving source, the creator of everything that exists, of all the building blocks of life, and the love that created us. So I think that's just important to kind of get an idea about what my mindset was, because I didn't even use the word God. And for a long time, I had really turned away from any kind of like gendered way of thinking about the Creator. So just important. That's just an important piece to know about it all. Of part of where my mind was at. So I woke up with this in my mind, and I thought, that's really interesting. Not unusual though for me. I'm accustomed to having, these downloads, and I'm accustomed to not just having the downloads, but also to paying attention and then following any direction that I receive. And so I thought, well, I'll just pay attention. We'll see what happens. And that day, nothing really strange happened. It was an ordinary day. Nothing stood out. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, who knows? Maybe it was something that I heard, or, maybe it was in a song or something. I don't know why that came into my mind in the morning, but, and I just let it go. I didn't think about it. And then I woke up the next day, and the next day I immediately woke up, and the first thing in my mind was, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And then I thought, that's really odd, because I knew that it was a scripture, obviously, but I didn't know yet what scripture it was. And so I thought, well, let me look this up. So I got on my phone and I looked it up, and of course it was from the same scripture, Psalm 23, which is, just to share it with you, yea, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. For it is He who makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside the still waters and restores my soul. It is He who leads me into righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for He is with me. His staff and His rod, they comfort me. He prepares a table for me to feast in the presence of my enemies, and anoints my head with oils. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, what I haven't told you that is so important about this, not only is it strange that I had this just come out of the blue into my mind in the morning before I started my morning gratitude practice. I immediately recognized it as being true, because that prior late summer, early fall, I had the most magnificent camping trip. One of my favorite pastimes is to go solo camping. I absolutely love being in the woods, as far from any other people as I can get. Just me and the trees and the creatures. That's my favorite thing in the whole world. It's where I feel the best. And I had this experience where I went camping a lot that previous year, 2021. I just had an opportunity that I could go every other weekend, or every other week. I would just go as often as I could. And so one time I got a last minute opportunity to go, and so I decided I wanted to go as far north as I could, all the way up to the big lake. There was this one spot where there's this one river that that has it just feeds into the lake, and it's just this really beautiful spot. It's just gorgeous. And so I thought, well, I'll go up there and I'll camp there. I've camped there before. Years ago, I camped on the beach there, and it was magical. And so I just drove up there on a whim. I had all my stuff already packed in the car. I just went up there, and it was like about a 4-hour drive or so. So I drove up there, and the beach had been completely eroded, and there was nowhere for me to camp. And so then I thought, well, I'll find a place. And I said a little prayer, and I asked Divine Loving Source to lead me to the right place for me to camp. And I'll say, I don't like state park camping at all. I don't like state park camping because like I said, I want to be away from people. I don't want to have to deal with other people. And when you're in the state park, you really have to deal with other people a lot. So but I just was trusting the process. And I went past a few places, and they weren't the right places. And so I just kept going. And probably about 20 miles or so south of there, Spirit brought me to this one place, State Forest Campground. And there was one campsite available. And it wasn't a beautiful campsite. There was nothing special about it. It was actually one of the types of campsites that I really don't like the most. But, it was free, actually. All the campsites were free that weekend. And so, while I was there, I was exploring, and I discovered that there was this national forest that was connected to the state forest, and a national hiking trail that was in that forest that I could get connected to. And also I found this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful campsite that was tucked out of the way, down in this little valley right next to the most gorgeous and pristine river. Absolutely pristine, crystal clear, ice cold waters. Absolutely gorgeous. And so I immediately booked every available weekend that I could. And then I stayed there. And so when I read Psalm 23, immediately in my mind was this campsite that I had just been in, because I had had deeply spiritual, profound experience, connection with Divine Loving Source, connection with God, while I was staying in this particular campsite that was literally, it was like my own little private campsite, completely surrounded by the woods, with a little tiny little beach that led out on this river. And the river is a small river. It's like maybe, I want to say maybe 10 feet from one side to the other, maybe a little bit more than that, but you can walk all the way across and probably never get higher than like the top of your thigh, or at least me, and I'm a short person. So it was so amazing. It was so amazing. I was literally laying, maybe it wasn't a pasture, but I was laying in the grass next to these absolutely stunning waters on the most beautiful day. And I immediately knew that Psalm 23 was speaking directly to that experience in my life. And then later I realized some other things that it was connecting to, but those are maybe for another day. I can dig into that more in another video. So this is supposed to be short. So got my attention immediately. I knew that the Creator was trying to get my attention. And so I decided to recite it with my morning prayers. And then I decided to go ahead and start working on committing it to memory. And so then I did. I committed it to memory. I wrote it down. I worked on memorizing it. And once I had it completely committed to memory, on that day, that morning, it was just like this absolutely beautiful spring morning. It was like one of those days, like after post-winter spring days, when it just feels like everything is coming alive. And we're coming off all of these really hard times, and there was just this different kind of energy out in the world. There were a lot of people outside. It was extra warm for early spring in Minnesota. It was warmer than usual. Everybody had their coats off. It was more like summer, but it wasn't, and so I was walking the dog, and I was reciting Psalm 23 in my mind and under my breath repeatedly. And we take about like a 3-mile walk or so. And as we were coming around the northeast end of the park, we end by walking around this park and then back to where I live. And as we were doing that, it's a park that's on this busy street. If there's an intersection there, like 2 of the busiest streets actually in the city. And there's like a little strip mall across the street, and bus stops all over the place. And there was just people everywhere. People in the park playing basketball, people in the grass playing soccer. There were people in the playground. There were people grilling. And there were people all over at the bus stops and across the street in the strip mall. Just everybody was outside, because it was like one of the first real decent days that we had after the winter. It was a long, gruesome winter. So everybody was outside, and we are walking. And then in this one moment, time just kind of stood still. There was a shooting that happened across the street, and everything just slowed down, slow motion, and I could see, it was like my vision expanded, and it was just huge. I could see, my peripheral vision all around. I could see everything that was happening except for behind my head. I could see everything all at once, and I could, and all of the sound of all of the people and background noises all disappeared immediately. And everything was happening in super, super, super slow motion. And I remember everybody hit the ground. I saw everybody on the ground. All the people in the park were on the ground. All the people across the street were on the ground. All the people in the bus stops were on the ground. Everybody had gotten down on the ground. There was one person that was running. They were across the street, and they were running straight down the street, and they were running out of their shoes. Like, they're running right out of their shoes. They were running so fast. And this is all kind of happening all at the same time. And I felt the bullet slice through the air off to the right of me. And I heard it. I heard the bullet slicing through the air off to the right of me. And it sounded just like in the movies or in the cartoons, the old cartoons, when you would hear that kind of zing or that ping sound. It sounded just like that. So that's what I heard. And then I heard it ricochet off of a sign that was in the park to the right and behind me. And it was like a moment, like frozen in time. There was this pause, and then like a breath in, and all of a sudden everything started moving again. All of the background noises started again. I could hear everybody doing what they were doing. I could see like a group of people like crouched down around someone at the bus stop, someone who was on the ground. Everyone in the park got up and started doing what they had been doing previously, went back to what they were doing previously. And you know, the whole time I was just standing. Me and my dog were the only ones standing. And then we went home, we walked home. I could see that everything was okay, that people were taking care of the person that was on the ground. I could hear the sirens of the first responders coming. And so I knew that everything was okay. And I also knew there was nothing I could do with my dog. She at the time was still very reactive, and I just knew that it would not be helpful for me to try and do anything to respond to as someone who can respond to a situation like that. I knew that everything was taken care of, and so we went home. And I remember I was irate. I was sort of indignant, you know, like how dare you encroach upon this beautiful day like this, and how much entitlement does a person have to do something like that in a public place, you know. And I understand it happens all the time, but I'm just not a cynical person. I'm not cynical. I have real and genuine feelings and reactions to things, and I don't think it's helpful to sort of minimize it or try to put up some kind of armor, diminish the experience by saying, oh, well, this happens all the time, these mass shootings, la la la, you know. So so I was angry about it. I just thought, how dare you? And we walked home, and that's what I was feeling as I was walking home. And I was also feeling immensely grateful because that bullet was so close. I've heard shootings before, and I have shot a gun before, but I have never been that close to a bullet going past me before. And it's an incredible experience. And I knew right then and there that God was talking to me. Pay attention. What are you doing? Look, I'm here, and I love you, and I'm leading you to all these beautiful places, and I'm protecting you. See, look at how I protect you. Look at how I keep you from harm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Emmanuel. So, God is with us. That's Emmanuel. That's what Emmanuel means. And that is just another name of many names for Yeshua, for Jesus Christ. And so that was the beginning of a courtship between Jesus and myself. And I woke up with other scripture in my head after that. I eventually got a Bible and started reading the Bible. And then at a certain point, I started to really feel strongly that I needed to get baptized and to follow the way of Jesus. And I did do that. Those are for another day. when I have more time, and to not take up too much more of your time. But that is the beginning of my testimony and of my of Jesus coming and getting me, the great shepherd coming and finding this lost sheep and bringing her home.